What's going on, reefers? Blaine here. In today's video, we're going to continue our top 10 SPS series at Top Shelf Aquatics. You've all been asking for it, so in this episode, we're gonna go into all the high-end SPS pieces. It's gonna be a lot of fun, so let's head straight over to the farm and see what Kevin has. What's going on, reefers? We are hanging out here in the farm with Kevin. Kevin, good to have you again.
Definitely.
We did the top 10 beginner SPS. We moved over to intermediate SPS, and today we're gonna be doing the top 10 high-end SPS coming out of Top Shelf Aquatics. I know everybody's been asking about this video. This is one we've been really excited about doing. Definitely. I know Acropora, SPS in general is definitely your main thing. So I was really excited about getting this video filmed out and out to you guys. We'll go ahead and start off right away. We'll start off with our number 10. So we'll talk about the TSA Heisenberg. So this is an Acroporas species we've just recently released, and it's really nice with that dark blue color and that nice kind of purplish lavender contrast on the polyps. Let's talk a little bit about the Heisenberg and how we got it into the farm.
Yeah, so that was one that was imported from ACI Aquaculture from Australia. The thing that really stands out to me, I mean, when you first look at it, it looks a lot like, you know, a lot of the tenuous and things that you see coming in. We don't really think it's the same species as a lot of those maricultures, though. You know, when you take a closer look, the branch structure and the coralites seem to be much more pronounced and large. So we think it may be Acropora kentai or perhaps a vermiculata. But you know, what you were touching on really that stands out is also that coloration, you know, hence the name Heisenberg. It had that kind of crystal-like blue scaling on the coralites, and then, you know, even on the axial polyp, you're starting to see the two-tone color coming in as well. And then if you really look close into the base color on that too, you can see some hints of pastel greens and pinks as well. So it's really kind of a unique piece to add to any collection, and it's actually one of our newest SPS releases as well.
I like to say that we're always constantly cooking new things here in the farm, and the Heisenberg name is perfect for that. You know, we're cooking up the Heisenberg Acropora, and then we've now released it to the public. I really like that one. We'll continue on the trend with some of the nicer stuff. This is one that a lot of people know about, so the Walt Disney. This is one that's been around for a long, long time. I feel like everyone that's been into SPS at some point has heard or seen a Walt Disney. So when did we get the Walt Disney in the farm here, and how did we originally source it?
I mean, originally we had got it direct from the source, from Mike Bigar. You know, obviously it's a shame that he's not with us anymore, but you know, with the things he was doing with his system, I mean, it had some of the most impressive SPS tanks that I had ever seen. And the coloration that he was able to pull on that specific coral kind of jump-started the trend in the hobby when it came to a lot of the rainbowed out tenuous corals, things like that. So, you know, that's a really iconic piece, one that we wanted to put special mention to. I mean, it's got, you know, crazy yellow polyps on it, yellowish orange. You know, the thing that really is hard to pull sometimes is the pinks on that piece, and that was one that really jumped out to me that he was always able to capture really well under the lights he was growing it in, which was a you know, mixed LED with T5s when he had that thing really looking amazing. We have it dialed in pretty well, but I would say that as good as we are, I've never had one Walt that looked as good as what his original piece had in his display tank. But yeah, we've been growing that one for almost a decade at this point, I think. Maybe a little less.
We've had on our list a lot of classics. We had the Green Slimer earlier. You know, we have the TSA Bill Murray. I feel like the Walt Disney is one that, you know, I've really come to enjoy and love. And like you said, it's an Acropora species that's, if you're able to really pull that true color out of it, you must be doing a good job at that point.
Definitely. If your Disney's a bit greened out, you probably have to dial things in a little bit more as far as, you know, traces, water quality, light spectrum, that kind of thing. So, you know, that's something to really eye, and it's a good canary coral when you're really trying to get everything looking tip top. coloration wise.
Moving forward, we have the TSA Flower Bomb. So this is one we showcased on Reef Builders. They did a nice article on that. We sent out some photos and videos. Where did this one come from, and how did we get this one cooking here at Top Shelf?
So that's another Australian piece. I would say big part of our collection is a lot of the wild Aussie pieces that come in. I think it's where I find a lot of unique things that you don't really see on a lot of the mariculture pieces that kind of get recycled and are a little more commonplace. That one, the thing I like about that too is just the growth structure on it, being a tabling piece. I've always loved tabling acros too. It's a great one to kind of add to some of your vertical peaks where you can kind of have it mounted and growing off of a face of rockwork. Coloration on that, I mean, that thing has some really nice orange polyps, some nice pink hues, a little bit of blue on the new growth as well. But really, I'd say growth structure stands out on that one compared to a lot of the ones you see. Like you mentioned, thinking about what that piece will eventually look like when you see a picture of the mother colony and where it'll fit in the display tank. If you're going to mount an acro, you really want to have a long-term plan with that.
One we haven't talked about in any of our lists, we've talked about speciosas. So we have the TSA Forbidden Fruit Speciosa, another newer one we've released. This one has some crazy coloring. That thing is absolutely insane. Let's talk a little bit about speciosa, what you would kind of give for care requirements and things like that, since we haven't talked about them before.
Yeah, I will say that these are some of the newest, hottest corals that are coming in. Obviously with the Malaysian imports, it's something that you didn't really see, but they are getting more and more common now. Now, I will point out they tend to be a little more difficult than a lot of your bread and butter acros. So we've had some ups and downs with them. We've had some experimentation on the different wild pieces. Obviously I don't have an extensive track record or data to back this up, but just anecdotally I've noticed that they seem to be a little more temperature sensitive. We try not to let the temp spike much over 78 degrees. We try to keep it more stable in that range. We did have some issues during the summer months when one of the fans blowing over the sump had let the temp creep up, and that's when I noticed more of those starting to RTN in particular. And those things too, just when they come in, they're so bleachy and sort of stressed. They take a while to get established in an aquarium, but that piece we've had for so long at this point, I mean, the polyp extension on that thing is just stunning. If you walk over to that tank, I mean, it just looks like flames coming out of the branches. And I mean, I love the speciosas, the texture on them, the shape, just that more delicate look. It's just something really unique, and I can't wait to see what eventually everyone gets when it comes to variety on those and how they'll do long term as we get more established farm grown species that have been in captivity for years. I think it's going to get easier and easier. At the beginning, a lot of times those things, when we cut them, they wouldn't do much of anything. This one puddles up, starts encrusting very, very quickly. So, I'm confident that we've kind of turned the corner on that one, and it's really, really what I would consider an aquaculture piece at this point, and kind of past that initial adjustment period.
The next one on our list, Rocky Balboa, another TSA piece. I love the name, and when you look at the colors, it's really a knockout when it comes to that coral. So where did we get the name from originally? How did we choose Rocky Balboa? And let's talk a little bit about the care requirements for this one.
So the name originally came because we had picked that up at Reef Stock in Denver, Colorado, years back from a local hobbyist who had been growing out a really nice colony, and we were able to snag a couple frags. He had said, hey, this is an unnamed piece, it's a really nice one, we think you're going to do great things with it. And the longer we kept that piece, just the better and better it got. I mean, just the vibrance of the polyps, I think, is really what stands out. As far as comparing that to something like a Walt Disney that tends to be a little more yellowish, this one would be more towards a cherry bomb, but the thing that makes it stand out is just the two-tone polyps that it gets. It's not, as distinctly red. I would say it's almost like a pinkish reddish color with orange undertones on the polyps, and then the tips on that are just vibrant blue, and that thing will get a lot of really nice color. I mean, everyone asks about it when they walk through the farm, and they see that thing standing out from feet away. So definitely a nice coral.
Surely when you guys saw it originally at the show in Reefstock, I feel like you've gone to the point where there's a lot of these corals you can kind of pinpoint and see, and you can see the potential right away. Was that something you saw as soon as you saw the piece? You're like, I got to get my hands on it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of those ones that you can kind of tell if a coral's gonna be more one of those ones that's a macro shot type coral, I would say. We all kind of know those ones that have more of the nuanced colors that you really have to look up close to appreciate. This one, looks great up close and from a distance, which are always my favorite corals in general. You can appreciate them from across the room while you're sitting on the couch, or you can appreciate them when you're really getting your face up to the glass. And yeah, that one's a winner across the board. I mean, the coloration has just gotten better and better over time when we really cook that thing with a heavy blue spectrum and give it real good proper nutrition with the corals and everything. So yeah, that's a great one to the collection right there.
If you guys have gotten to this point in the video, you guys obviously are interested in SPS, and we've had our beginner SPS, we've had our intermediate. It's basically like the school of SPS here at Top Shelf Aquatics. SPS are for sure a type of coral that it's kind of a challenge, right? You get to the point where you're getting great growth and you're getting great color at the same time.
When it comes to coloration, there's just so many variables that come into play. A lot of it has to do with light spectrum. So, I would point to that as something that you really want to, I would say these days, if you're trying to maximize a lot of the fluorescence, running a heavier blue spectrum. But with Acropora, you want to make sure you're having a good white peak as well, or else a lot of times they can kind of green out, or the colors won't really bring out a lot of that luster. So, it's a fine line, but running predominantly heavy blues with at least a 4 to 6 hour period of white light really helps with the coloration across the board on most of our stuff. Coral nutrition is another thing that really does help bring out the coloration as well. So I would recommend that people, nutrients permitting, that they're feeding their tanks a good amount, and really trying to add a lot of the specific coral foods, planktonic, aminos, things like that, that those specific corals can feed on a regular basis. A food that we like to mix in too, in addition to that, would be Benepets. It's great because a lot of times if your tank's running a little dirtier, you can still feed that. And because of the probiotics, it doesn't seem to negatively tank the water quality. And we do put a lot of live phytoplankton. A lot of times when you're dealing with these Acroporas, everyone thinks when they're starting off, oh, my water quality has to be perfect, I have to have zeros across the board. We've had the best luck really kind of towing that line about not going too clean, because a lot of times with these Acroporas, they'll have them get a little bleachier, the color vibrance won't really come out as well. They may have more of that pastel look. Sometimes they'll grow well and they'll be relatively healthy, but to get the real rich coloration, we always target having, maybe 10 to 20 nitrates in a heavily stocked reef tank. Usually the phosphates, we go between 0.05 to 0.1, which may sound a little higher, and that's not necessarily a cure-all number that I'll say to everyone. We've just found that when the tank's really slam-packed, we have to bring those levels up nutrient-wise a little bit more, just to maintain the good growth and coloration that we really like to see. When a lot of these maxed out systems, when you see here just wall-to-wall Acroporas, we'll notice some of the stuff bleaching, Monty's getting a little pale, things like that when it starts dipping down a little too low.
You made a good point. A lot of time I feel like people sometimes forget that you're gonna want nutrients in your tank once that tank starts to fill in and the corals are growing. We wanted to go into a little bit deeper information on the chemistry side. We're gonna talk a little bit about pH, and we'll talk about alkalinity. So for pH here in the farm, what are we doing to get to that achievable level of pH, and what numbers are we trying to shoot for?
Yeah, so like you had kind of mentioned, obviously the more you're getting into these SPS and having a tank that is full of a lot of these corals that are just growing heavy skeletal bases and branches, they're going to be pulling a lot more out of the water as far as calcium and alkalinity and magnesium. So it will require a little bit more fine tuning and testing, and At this point, you've probably gotten to where your tank's running a calcium reactor or a doser or something like that to keep those levels really stable. Now, for us, we aim to really keep alkalinity super flatline, and kind of pairing to that, you had touched on pH. Elevating that pH past where maybe a normal reef tank might be hovering around 7.8, 8 during the day. If you're able to push that up to around that 8.3, 8.4 level consistently and keeping that fairly stable, that's where we've found we've been able to achieve the best growth and a lot of the better coloration on these corals too. But Kalkwalser was a vital tool for us to really be able to push past those thresholds consistently. So most of these systems, we run Kalk reactors on them, and we have that not necessarily plumbed through. Some people would run Kalkwalser and an auto top off, that kind of thing. We have them running through a doser in the system, and we were able to even dial in through the apex to where we're dosing a heavier amount of the Kalkwalser at nighttime, where the pH tends to naturally be driven down to help boost that up and keep it more stable, so you don't have those drastic swings where it's going maybe from 8.4 to 8 or 7.8 or something like that at nighttime. We're able to keep that a little more consistent. And also a lot of our systems run refugiums too, which do help keep that pH stable as well, especially when they're set up on a reverse light cycle. My guys who monitor that and gals, Megan, are totally on top of that, and they do an excellent job really keeping these systems rock solid and stable. A lot of systems here in this farm, a lot of systems here in the retail store to monitor, but that's why we have a crew testing this stuff every day, sometimes even twice a day, because things can change really quickly with the amount of coral we have in here.
You're constantly absorbing that throughout the course of the day. So I feel like you touched on some really good points about nutrition and all those things for our SPS. Let's go back into our list. We have a triple grafted Monty. We haven't talked about any Monties today yet, but we have the triple grafted Mind Melt Montipora that we've made here in the farm. Another one of your projects. Let's talk about that colors. We have the bright green, the nice dark green, and also the red. How did we get to this point where we have now the triple grafted Monty?
So we have so many different plating Monties that we farm here at Top Shelf Aquatics. At one point or another, we've tried grafting every color combination I think we have in the building, and some with success, some without. This one was one we kind of stumbled upon as we were splicing things and saying, okay, well, hey, this red seems to pair with this green, and this red also seems to pair with this yellow-green. Now let's try to splice the combo all together, and we were able to get that triple grafted piece. Now, it did take us some time to get that to production, because obviously, when you kind of piece these things together, you end up with just a colony that looks sort of blocky. To get the nice frags that have all three colors that are going to form a beautiful colony for people, where they really swirl together, that took many generations of selective cutting and piecing things back together and that sort of thing. But we've had some pretty crazy colonies come out of that. And I think it's just something that, if you're going to have a Monty cap and it's going to take up a good amount of space, you want that one showpiece, unique one that can be something that you can even have fun with by re-splicing it back together and kind of manipulating the way it grows and looks, to really have all three of those colors kind of swirling out together. So yeah, it's been a little pet project, but it's coming along, and that piece is stand out here in the farm for sure.
Like you said, I'm really excited about seeing a couple of these pieces. I know there's some that we have in the farm that are growing out of it. I can't wait to see a big full-on colony of Mind Melt. That's going to be really cool with all the different pedaling of the caps that they do, and having that 3 different color mixture is really, really unique. You were talking about splicing. We're going to go ahead and transition back over to the Acropora. We have the raspberry splice. So this was another project you had. I'm kind of curious to hear, did you have more success with the Monties when you were trying to graft them comparative to the Acropora? Because I know the raspberry splice is kind of us working on manufacturing a new piece. What did you see between the two?
So when it comes to the Acropora, in my experience, a lot of that with the splice tends to be something that happens the longer we hold on to these pieces being slammed together in captivity. I think a lot of that has has to do with those aberrant colorations appearing. But you know, like anything with a lot of our acros that show that, just starts with one little speck of green fluorescence that starts to infect the colony, and then over time it'll grow in to the point where we had enough of that where I can selectively cut branches, mix and match that in with some of the other traditional colonies to get it looking the way it does now, where you see that a lot of these branches that are coming off, you know, they almost change from sort of that purpley green color of the regular raspberry limeade. It's almost like a blackish color with those fluorescent ultra green swirls and polyps popping up mixed in there. It just looks really interesting. I think that's one of the more underrated spliced acros that we have in the farm, and you know, another one that I enjoy, you know, having some fun with too. And you know, again, with any of those pieces, just kind of keeping an eye on them, selectively cutting, merging it back to itself. You can have a lot of fun making that colony look whatever color mix you're really going for on that.
You made a good point. I think that's definitely one of the pieces here in the farm that we don't give enough love to. The raspberry splice has been around for some time at this point. Obviously, it's a generational to be able to get to the point where we're mass producing it for people. But it's definitely something that I feel like doesn't get nearly as much hype as the nuclear fusion Monty, things like that. And so it's cool to be able to showcase it here on the channel, talk more about it, and get the idea and the name out to people so that way they see the raspberry splice and they'll pick up one themselves.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of my faves.
Staying on the same trend, we have so many grafted pieces, and obviously a lot of them are the high-end stuff, right? So we have another triple grafted color. So we have the TSA Fruit Swirl Setosa. This is a Setosa. We talked about them earlier in the beginner SPS section, but we have this really nice triple colored one. How did we get to the point where we had the triple color? Did it start off with the Tequila Sunrise and then we were able to gain that extra coloration? How did we get to this point?
So throughout the farm, we probably have over 20, 25 colonies of Setosas, various mixed colors. And it's a coral that you don't really see getting imported too often. So finding unique colorations tends to be difficult. It used to just be pretty much red that you'd see all the time with maybe little flecks of green and that sort of thing. A lot of ours, when you look carefully throughout the systems, have developed many different graft spots. So we've had some of the reds that have purple coming in, and then some of the ones that have more of that orangey greenish tone to it too. And then we have a different Setosa that we picked up that was more of a vibrant orange coloration as well. Now, that specific piece happened to be one section of one of the red ones that showed all three colors that we had cut out and isolated, and then again, over periods of time, selectively cutting it to promote the different colors to grow and mix where they don't get pinched off and end up just getting outcompeted or dominated. We were able to get more of a balanced colony that really exhibits all three colors very evenly. And what's nice about the Monty on this one is it doesn't seem like some of the corals that are spliced where one color will just almost take over. You know, it seems like those colors are pretty equally balanced as far as how they grow. So as long as you get a frag that has that mix, it'll end up looking absolutely stunning, especially when you let it grow out, just the way Setosas look when you're not fragging them all the time. They get those nice fingers on them. It just can really look beautiful as a showpiece. And that one's taken a lot of work, but you can read more about it on an article they did on Coral Magazine as well. But it's catching on, and we're starting to sell more and more of those, and we've got it to the point where it's to production where I can maybe get frag here and there, maybe 2 or 3 a month. But it still will take some time to get out there to people to the point where everyone has one in their tank. But it's a labor of love. We get those spliced pieces rolling, and with the 3 colors, it's a bit more challenging than it is just with your normal 2-color piece.
It's good to give people a perspective of how many of these pieces are actually coming out of the farm per month. When I look at some of our really high-end corals, people tend to forget that some of these SPS corals in general don't have a rapid growth rate. So it's going to take some time to be able to procure and make those frags that we're able to get out to the public, especially like you were saying, if it's a triple colored graft, you're wanting to make sure you have every single color as well. So I think it's good for people to hear at home, you know, that these aren't just coming out all the time, and that's why they are so high end, because the fact that they're able to come out and that there are frags available is just another reason why someone should grab them up and bring them into their tank at home.
Definitely.
We'll talk about probably one of the nicest, if not the nicest on our list. The TSA Bubble Yum Acropora is crazy. We're, you know, looking at those yellow coralites. I mean, just the coloring in general, that piece is amazing. Let's talk a little bit more about the Bubble Yum.
Yeah, so that's a piece we've been growing for, I think we originally released that back before this larger farm was even built. That was one from the old farm. You know, started off from a small piece that was imported, and you know, over time it's you know, had its ups and downs with coloration. It can be one that's a little harder to really dial in and pull out the vibrance on the pink polyps. But once you get that really popping, you'll see the two-tone polyps that can develop, and the bright yellow in the axial growth tips. And yeah, it's just a really interesting piece. I mean, another one that tends to get really bushy and with nice flowy polyps in our system. Yeah, I mean, that's a stunner. Another rainbow tenuous to add to our list.
For sure. We've, you know, everybody's been asking nonstop on the comments. They want to see the high-end SPS video, and I have to say the Bubble Yum is a great example of a truly high-end. You know, it's got a fairly high price tag, but it's worth it in the end if you can get that to grow out and become a colony. It's truly an amazing piece.
Yeah, and it's been pretty hardy overall compared to some of the other tenuous that we've had. You know, even with some of the ups and downs in the system, it tends to just lose the color, not necessarily just start dying off, you know, or that sort of thing. I think at this point it's been in captivity for so long that even if it's not 100% optimized, it still grows and it still looks good. But yeah, you know, that's a great one. I would definitely reach into those pockets and, you know, put that one on your list.
We'll talk about our crown jewels. So this is the last one on our list. So this one is by far my favorite. I was never a stickhead before I came to Top Shelf, and after I ended up seeing the TSA Fruity Splice, I fell in love. I immediately was like, how can I start becoming a better reef keeper so that way I can get to the point where I have that? It started out as the Fruity Pebbles, correct? So started at the Fruity Pebbles, and now it's gotten to the point where it's basically its own coral. How did we get from the Fruity Pebbles to now the TSA Fruity Splice?
So back to kind of what I was touching on with the acros, you know, a lot of it, I hate to take away credit from myself and the crew here, but you know, it's a little bit of luck comes into play with this thing being in captivity for so long. That initial speck of green was just something that we noticed literally in the middle of the colony that had developed on one that was you know, sitting in our system. And the key with that, it was really just noticing that, being able to cut it out and isolate it. Since that's a tabling piece, with it being kind of stuck in the middle, it would have never grown to the point where that green would have ever really spread. What we had to do is cut open, break that out. Once we got some of the growth edges going with the green, then it really started producing a lot more of the branches with that coloration and starting to spread that color more throughout the colony. And then we were able to pluck out other pieces that had that green mix, resplice them back to various parts of the colonies to the point where we have a really good mix of swirls and different colorations throughout. And you know, that's just a beautiful piece to begin with. I mean, really the Fruity Pebbles stands on its own as a rainbow piece, but adding that extra amount of flair to it with that fluorescent green, you know, just makes it jump out even more, you know, to you when you see it across the room. And you know, having that really tight tabling growth structure, it just looks very unique and pretty in an aquarium, especially when it's grown in.
It was talked about in older videos, the bonsai style. It's a very good example of when you guys got a piece, you had it, like you said, smack in the middle, you had to go ahead and get in there and start bonsaiing it so that way you could get more of that green growth. The maroon, dark maroon color with that green fluorescence is absolutely breathtaking. If you had to choose one on the list though, if you're looking at all the 10 that we've talked about, I know there's a lot of high-end ones. I know you're huge in your grafted corals. What would you say be your favorite piece coming out of Top Shelf Aquatics for your high-end Acropora?
You know, being that, oh man, you're really putting me on the spot on this one. Oh, I mean, you're talking about some of my most favorite corals in my life. I would probably have to go with the Fruity Pebbles, though. I mean, just the personal attachment, being that we've been growing the main Fruity and converting that to a Splice. That thing's been in captivity for so long. I mean, you know, the other good thing about that piece too is the Fruity Pebbles just in general, in addition to the Splice, is a very, very hardy Acropora. And it's not one that tends to have the tank be perfect to be looking amazing. It will pull better colors under certain conditions, like the orange fluorescence, I would say, is one that when that's popping on the correlates, that's when it's in its ideal state. But yeah, it's a great one. You know, it's one that rarity of the Splice adds an extra flair to it, and the fact that you can kind of manipulate that colony as it grows. It's not one you just kind of throw in there and forget it. You know, it's a true hobbyist coral, and it's one that people can buy with confidence, I would say.
Well, I want to say thank you again, Kevin.
Definitely.
This was a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
If you guys enjoyed this video and if you saw anything out of the list that you're looking to add into your reef tank at home, head over to our website, topshelfaquatics.com, and pick up some amazing frags. The team here, Kevin, everyone involved in bringing these corals to you are bringing you some of, if not the best aquaculture pieces in the hobby. So big kudos to you and your team. I want to say thank you to you guys for checking out this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future uploads.